Alright kids, so in this one we're going to go into the immune response in a lot more detail. Now, this one should make the third line of defense seem a lot clearer than the last lesson did. Like it's just, we'll go into a bit more detail and yeah, so it should make more sense after this. Alright, so basically at the end of this you should be able to explain immunity, explain the antibody-antigen complex with a diagram and words. This means describe what it is and draw a picture of it. And you should be able to draw a flow chart that explains we're going to use a diagram, you should be able to turn that into a flow chart with little diagrams that explains the specific immune response in detail. Alright, let's go. So immunity, basically, it's the resistance to a specific disease. If you're immune to something, you're resistant to it. Now you have natural immunity for some diseases. These are diseases this is immunity we can inherit genetically, so we're just genetically immune to it. It can be passed on to from the mother to child through breastfeeding. This is a passive immunity because just the antibodies are passed on. We'll get to that. Or it can be active immunity, which you can acquire from fighting off a disease. So once you've fought off a disease, you shouldn't really get that again. We can have artificial immunity, and this comes from vaccinations. Alright, so the antibody-antigen complex. We see it over here. You've got an antigen, so this is your bacteria, and it has, see these different shape antigens coming off it? There's only one antibody which can bind to that. So antibody A can only bind to this one, antibody C can only bind to this shape, and antibody B can only bind to that shape. And that's kind of how it works. So antibodies, we'll go to highlighter. So antibodies, they're proteins that bind to antigens like a lock and key. They bind to the antigens, they inhibit their activity, and mark them for destruction. So they serve two purposes. Okay, and they're specific to each antigen. It's really important to know that they are specific to each antigen. So if the antigen enters the body again, we're already immune. Okay, the body is prepared and it can attack it again once those antibodies have been produced the first time. If that changes, however, the previous antibodies no longer effective. So if there is a mutation, if the virus evolves or the bacteria evolves and that particular antigen changes, they're no longer effective. And this is really common in the cold, and this is why we have, the flu, which is why we have different flu vaccinations every year. Like they change each year. They're very rapid turnover, rapid mutations. So this is what it actually looks like. So you've got these two chains here which don't really ever change. Like they kind of stay the same. The only bit that changes are these. These two parts change. So the body has this set up, like this is made all the time. And it's really easy for it to do that. And it produces these which match the antigens that enter the body. Alright, so here's how it works. Basically, the white blood cells, they're called B lymphocytes. They make the bone marrow, and each lymphocyte makes an antibody that attacks one antigen. So every single B lymphocyte only makes one type of antibody. But because we make millions of different lymphocytes, so each lymphocyte makes an antibody that one particular antigen. Okay. Basically, millions of different lymphocytes are made in the bone marrow. Therefore, you can actually protect against an unlimited number of diseases or antigens. So they move out to the body and through the blood, and they carry the antibodies on the surface. Alright. So the lymphocyte then comes in contact with an antigen, which it can bind to, and it does. It binds to it, and then the lymphocyte, so it binds, and then it produces the lymphocyte to reproduce. It just keeps splitting and dividing and making many, many more of it. These lymphocytes release their antibodies, which bind to the antigens and make the virus inactive. Okay, so Once the antigens are bound up, the virus becomes inactive. Then along come the phagocytes, the macrophages, and they engulf it and destroy it. And they do this because they recognize the antibody on there. They got to destroy that. Now, lymphocytes, which make this particular antibody, they can remain in the blood for years. This is your immunity. Now, sometimes you're going to have the immunity will not stay high forever. It will decrease, and if it's something that's protected by a vaccine, you'll need to have a booster shot. All right, so that's the immune system. I hope that made a bit more sense. Hang on a second. May remain in the blood for many years. I hope that made a bit more sense. I hope it cleared up some of the questions from the previous lesson. All right, I'll see you in class.